A little, dirty puppy stood steadfastly on the rails, tail wagging with determination, amidst the bustling sounds of a busy railway station. Bystanders were concerned when the dog hesitated to move, his gaze locked on a spot beneath a nearby bench. Someone called the police because they were concerned about the puppy's safety. As officers approached the insistent puppy, their demeanor changed from wonder to alarm. But he refused to move under any circumstances. They became pale when they discovered why. When the cops eventually got the puppy off the railway tracks, all it seemed to want to do was go back on. They'd never seen a young animal so determined, but with the trains now running again, they couldn't let it happen. But an employee at the railroad station had decided she wanted to find out why this puppy was so determined to jump back into probable death. And it didn't take long for her to figure out the truth. She instantly ordered all trains to stop. She only hoped she wasn't too late. They should have listened to the puppy sooner. But what was the puppy doing on the track? Why did the cops have to intervene, and why was the animal so determined to return? People at the train station were frequently worried about the presence of stray animals near the lines. It was impossible to foresee whether they would get on the track and slow down the trains or, worse, be murdered on those rails. Employees even kept an eye on pets that individuals brought with them, making sure they were always leashed or put in a cage. Even with all of their measures, they were unable to stop this determined dog. Just after the daily morning rush hour, the station became less congested, and the number of trains passing decreased. Normally, this was the point at which staff could exhale a sigh of satisfaction that everything had gone as planned for the day. However, not this morning. They received a call from one of the train operators who had just passed through the station. He reported seeing something move on the track. He hadn't noticed it until he was quite close, and he was lucky that it was at that moment on the track going the other way. Employees took this call very seriously and rushed to the station deck, where there were already a few of people who appeared to have seen the same event and the train conductor. However, because it was quite well disguised, the personnel had difficulty seeing it at first. Lilly, one of the train station shop staff, was the one who first noticed it. It was scarcely moving and blended in with the rusted old train tracks. But she didn't have any doubts. On the tracks, there was a puppy. They were aware that they needed to act quickly. Someone quickly called the two nearest train conductors and the local headquarters to inform them that they should not enter the station for the time being because they needed to send personnel on the rails to get something off it. They were not allowed to enter the railroad tracks until they received approval from everyone. That was only for their own protection, plus also allowed onlookers to have a better look at the sad puppy on the rails. It was definitely in poor condition. It had evidently not spent its formative months in a loving and caring environment. This puppy has most likely spent more time on the street attempting to survive. And, more often than not, this meant that it had negative impressions of people. It took around 5 minutes for everyone to agree that trains would avoid the station for the time being. The first train had already arrived and was impatiently waiting at the station's door. Now that 2 staff have access to the tracks, they assumed it would be a simple capture because the puppy appeared to be frail and would not have the energy to run away from them for long. They, on the other hand, vastly misjudged this determined young animal. The puppy was making such a fool of the employees that spectators couldn't help but chuckle. Despite their frustration with the delay, it was obvious that they would not be able to obtain the puppy. Bystanders even offered to aid, but it was against protocol, and if anything went wrong, the train station would be fully accountable. It had already been made very plain to the employees that this was not an option. They even tried a different method of scaring the puppy away from the station. It may get off the tracks himself there. But that didn't work either because the dog seemed determined not to leave the station for some reason. This spectacle had been going on for nearly 10 minutes, and there were several trains waiting. People were becoming agitated, and the employees realized they were running out of time. They required assistance from those who knew what they were doing and had the necessary tools. With passengers becoming increasingly agitated, station workers decided to contact animal control for assistance. However, they are severely understaffed and would not be able to arrive for at least another hour. That was going to take an eternity. The only other choice was to contact the police. It sounded absurd to ask police assistance in capturing or chasing away a stray puppy, but the longer this delay lasted, the more train traffic would be disrupted, and the more money it would all cost. Because all of this was taking place at a major train station, the cops arrived shortly. But first, they needed to pick up some equipment from animal control, which would take around 15 minutes. 15 priceless minutes. While the staff waited for the police to arrive, they did their utmost to ensure that at least some trains passed through safely. They attempted to lure the puppy to one of the tracks so that a train could slowly make its way onto the other track and continue its voyage. It was a sluggish and perilous prose. At one point, the dog went beneath one of the trains, bringing everything to a halt once more. Only 2 trains were able to pass in the time it took for the cops to arrive. And there was already a lot of train traffic in the area. However, when the police arrived, most of the passengers who had been waiting impatiently were put at ease. They were clearly taking this seriously. They arrived with 4 fit-looking cops, fully armed with capture nets and a cage to lock the puppy in. It was only a matter of time before they snatched the puppy. They immediately cornered and caught the homeless puppy in one of their nets. The animal squealed and trashed around as much as it could, but it didn't help. The officer swiftly lifted the net containing the puppy off the train tracks and placed the distressed animal in the little cage they had prepared. When they closed the little cage door, the puppy starts trashing in against the cage's side. Every step is made in the direction of the railway tracks. The puppy's strength and determination caused the cage to tumble over. None of the people present have ever seen anything like this before. Why was this animal so desperate to be on the railway tracks? Whatever the rationale, it was primarily for future consideration. The trains needed to get back on track as soon as possible. There were a lot of people waiting at the station. The police offered to take the puppy to a neighboring shelter, but Lilly, the train station shopkeeper, informed them she would take care of it. The cops, of course, agreed because she spared them the trouble. But Lilly had no plans to take this puppy to the shelter. She was determined to discover what was driving this puppy to continue running on the train tracks. Lilly, of course, needed to keep the puppy locked away while all the trains were getting back on track. She knew exactly what would happen if she unlocked the cage, and it was also what she desired. Only not right now. She preferred to wait for a better opportunity. She eventually decided to keep the dog in the staff room for the time being. The animal calmed down and ceased trashing in the cage after being transferred away from the railway tracks. However, such conduct gave place to soft howling. The puppy was clearly upset. Because Lily knew the dog would most likely have to stay in that room for hours on end, she began to feel sorry for the animal. She had already had a terrible day, so she decided to use her lunch break to go buy some food for the animal. When she returned to the room, the puppy was still screaming, but at a considerably lower volume. It was definitely lacking in strength. Lily had no idea where it had come from or what it had done before arriving here. However, it could not have been easy. The puppy appeared to have been living on the street for some time, and while it was not particularly underweight, it appeared to be in need of food. So when Lily opened the can of dog food, she watched its ears perk up almost immediately. It was the first time Lily had seen the dog appear even vaguely joyful. Its tail began to wag and its tongue emerged from its mouth, and the more it waited for food, the more it began to salivate. There was no doubt in my mind that this beast was hungry. She placed the dog food in a bowl for the puppy and watched it devour it. And Lily began to develop feelings for this animal. It did not deserve the life it had led thus far, and perhaps she might assist it in finding a better one. But Lily never lost sight of what she had originally hoped for her puppy to perform. And that was that it still needed to show her why it kept returning to the track. And she'd have that chance that evening. After lunch, all of the trains that had been delayed due to the puppy's behavior were back on schedule. The entire operation was back on track, which meant Lily could estimate when she would get her chance. The last train would arrive at the station about midnight. After that, there would be no traffic for the next 5 hours. Lily has plenty of time to get back on track with the dog. But the trouble was that her shift had already ended at 7, when all the stores closed. This also meant that the staff break room was slated to close, leaving Lily with nowhere to wait until midnight. She began to wonder if she really wanted to stay and discover the truth. Was it worth it to give up her entire evening to this weird puppy's antics? She might simply take the animal to the shelter. It was exactly what she had promised the cops she would do, and it made perfect sense. There was no need for her to bear this weight alone. It was not an easy choice. But she knew she was doing the right thing as she gazed into the animal's eyes. There was no question about it. She decided to take the dog with her after her shift and go out to lunch at a nearby restaurant. She would sit and wait until practically midnight because the palace was open until 11 p.m. and they had no problem with her lingering if she sometimes ordered something to drink. They even brought the puppy water. At the restaurant, the animal was quite peaceful. They were quite far away from the rails, and Lily assumed that whatever was on the tracks was no longer detectable. It made her pleased to see him this way, but she couldn't wait to get back to the station. When the clock struck 11 p.m. and the restaurant closed, Lily slowly but steadily made her way back to the station, and the closer they went, the more agitated the puppy became. Whatever it was reacting to had to be still there. She walked up to where the trains came and sat on one of the benches. The dog realized where he was and began to try to escape the cage with everything he had. But he had to wait till the final train had passed. Even as the train's arrival time approached, there were few passengers still at the station. However, the active puppy drew the attention of everyone in the room. Some even appeared to be upset at Lily for keeping this poor dog in a cage. But, for the most part, Lilly attempted to ignore them. She knew something they didn't, and she had a legitimate reason for putting the puppy in a cage. Even though it wasn't for long, because she could see the last train of the day pulling into the station. A few people boarded and a few people boarded. As the train pulled away from the station, leaving only Lilly and the puppy behind, all of the station's lights went out for the night. This was the moment she had been looking forward to. Lilly took a deep breath and slowly reopened the small cage door. The puppy wasted no time and ran towards the train tracks, jumping on it. Lily's heart was pounding in her chest as she pursued the animal. Because it was so dark, Lilly could only hear the puppy doing something down there, so she had to use her phone's flashlight to locate the animal. When she eventually caught sight of him, she noticed that he was still attentively sniffing about the track. He was still looking for what he had discovered earlier that day. And Lilly examined the idea that this entity was no longer present at all. Perhaps someone had picked it up off the rails, or a passing train had hit it. But shouldn't the puppy have lost its smell by then? Since he was trapped in that cage, the animal had regularly reacted to something. Even now, it was catching a whiff of something. If whatever it was hunting for was already gone, it couldn't have left such a powerful aroma. Lilly was just watching the puppy with bated breath as it zeroed in on the source of the scent. Then something happened. Lilly knew the puppy had found what it had been seeking for when it eventually sat down close to one of the railroad tracks. They gingerly climbed the train tracks and approached the puppy slowly. Despite the fact that she believed they had spent the day bonding, the animal began to snarl at her with each step she took in its way. It was evidently prepared to defend something. Lilly, on the other hand, was undeterred. She continued a steady pace, and happily, it appeared that it would just stop roaring. The dog was neither attacking nor barking at her. And as Lilly shone her spotlight again on the dog, she saw why it was so desperate to go to the train tracks. Lilly had to work hard to look beyond the puppy, who was doing everything he could to block her view. But as she got closer, it became evident that the dog was attempting to return to the tracks in order to protect a small kitten from all the trains. This tiny creature couldn't be more than a few weeks old. It was little, looked weak and malnourished, and was most likely unable to walk because it had not moved from this position all day. Lilly realized she had to assist this unfortunate creature. She quickly returned to grab the cage, and with great difficulty, she managed to fit the puppy inside. She was almost attacked several times, despite the fact that the animal clearly did not want to be taken from the kitten again. Lilly wished she could just tell the animal about her good intentions. She delicately took up the frail kitten and placed it in her coat pocket. It was plainly in pain, as evidenced by its weak little sounds. Lilly was heartbroken, but she knew that was the best way to help the animal. Getting off track, she quickly called an emergency vet who could see her right away. Lilly should not have brought the kitten in a day later, according to that woman. Or it may have passed the point of no return. But she could now help the injured and weak cat, as well as bring the puppy back to full strength. Lilly came to the practice a few days later to check on the animal's progress, and both of them were doing extremely well. In fact, the vet was preparing to transport them to a shelter where they could be adopted. But Lilly had a different opinion. She had done a lot of soul-searching over the last few days and had finally decided what she wanted to do. She planned on adopting both the puppy and the cat. She had never contemplated getting a pet before, but this appeared to be fated by religion. And now the three are living happily together.